Hello, and welcome to Gunfighter Life. As always, I'm your host, Michael Milito. This is the podcast where we talk about gunfighting the right way from a Judeo-Christian worldview and those values from a real-world first-hand perspective. Before I plug in the bio, don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave a review of the podcast. If you want to support the podcast, go ahead and go to Patreon, type in Good Shepherd Training, or just go to the show notes and check out the link there. Today's episode is going to be on lesser-known handgun cartridges. We just did lesser-known rifle cartridges. This will be lesser-known handgun cartridges. So that'll be today's episode. If you want to skip the intro, you can skip to about 4 minutes, and that should get you into the main body of the episode today. First and foremost, I am a Christian. I make no apologies for that. It is first and foremost in my life, the greatest of all the commandments. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one, and you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, and with all your strength. I don't apologize for that. I am an alpha male, and as such I follow the ultimate male, the ultimate alpha male, the greatest man that ever lived, Jesus Christ. A little bit about my background. In addition to that, I am a veteran. I've been to war. I served in both the United States Marine Corps in the infantry and the United States Army, both full-time and part-time National Guard. Joined at 17, went to war more than once. I also served in law enforcement. I worked as a police officer in LAPD doing patrol assignments and more specialized assignments, tracking down fugitives and those kind of jobs. So by God's grace, I've made it through some nasty places and times overseas and some dangerous streets in the States. Not because I'm better than any of the men that didn't, but because God chose to have mercy and grace on me. To God be the glory. Also served as a private contractor for the U.S. government. For an agency I won't specify. By God's grace, He got me through all that. In addition to that, I started competition shooting even before I joined the Marine Corps at 17. I've been blessed to win more shooting competitions than I can remember, both rifle and pistol. Mostly pistol are most of my competition and championship wins. But I have also competed in, muzzle loader, archery, shotgun, knife throwing, hatchet throwing. I've been very blessed with those talents, and I try and use them and multiply them. I've done quite a bit of hunting and outdoor, I guess we'd say, survival type activities, hunting and fishing all over this beautiful country. I have been a professional hunter and guide. Not many people today can see they've been a professional, exotic, and big game hunter of things like bison and exotic animals, but I have been one, and I'm very blessed for that. I've also gone out into the wilderness, by God's grace, with a Bible and a shotgun, and not just survived, but thrived. Also a professional firearms instructor. For the United States Marine Corps, I was an urban warfare and desert warfare instructor under a Mojave Viper. I'm also a FBI certified firearms instructor and have been for a lot of years. I'm certified by some other 3-letter government agency. NRA certified instructor. And I have taught at one of the big name firearms shooting academies in the country. So I've been very blessed to win many competitions and be a shooting instructor for military, law enforcement, and civilians. I have served as a commander of a tactical team. My current full-time job is as the leader of a tactical team. Primary mission is to stop active shooters in a fairly large metropolitan area. Alright guys, today we're going to be talking about lesser known or maybe forgotten handgun cartridges. Hopefully you listened to the rifle cartridge one, but if not, it's okay. This one can be a standalone episode. But lesser known handgun cartridges, kind of ones that have either fallen by the wayside or they're kind of a niche cartridge. The first one I'm going to talk about, if you've been around guns a long time, you're probably familiar with it. It was popular, a century ago. It was one of the big handgun calibers, but today it's very obscure, and I only know of one new handgun chambered in it, and that is the 32 ACP. A lot of people are familiar with the 45 ACP and the 38, 380 rather, the ACPs, but the 32 ACP, the 32 ACP has kind of been foreshadowed and forgotten, and it has kind of been replaced by the 380. The 380 is also a very old cartridge, but it's kind of stuck around like the 45 Auto in its own little niche. And you'll generally find it, there are some exceptions, you can find it in some bigger pistols. Walther makes some in some bigger pistols, both newer models and older models. for the 380 I'm talking about. But usually 380s, you think of a small, super compact, super slim pocket pistol. You know, the Ruger LCR, I'm sorry, not the LCR, the LCP really brought this into popularity again, kind of in a modern iteration, I think. I'm sure others did it before, but that one really made the 380 super compact, what I'll call pocket pistol, popular again. And I think because the 380 is so popular, people have forgotten about the 32 ACP. The one new gun I know that's chambered in it is the 32 Kel-Tec, the Kel-Tec P32, I believe it's called. And that's a great gun. I owned one, and one of the guns that I sold that I wish I had hung on to. It was ridiculously accurate. It was a great gun. And the big reason I think this is worth mentioning over the 380 is if you're in a little subcompact gun like that, you get substantially less recoil than you do with the 380. You know, a little tiny pocket pistol in 380 often will recoil more than a full-size 9mm because you are getting a little bit less power, but you're getting a lot less weight in the gun. So the felt recoil, the perceived recoil for the shooter tends to be more. And you can mitigate that with the 32 ACP. That Kel-Tec P32 is a great gun, and there's a lot of older guns chambered in 32 that are really good guns. So don't think that the 32 is a useless cartridge just because there are other ones that are more popular. The next ones I'm going to talk about, the very next one is probably the most popular, and I guess it's not really forgotten, it's just kind of in its own niche, but it's the 357 SIG. If you're not familiar with the 357 SIG, it was kind of designed with the goal in mind to duplicate 357 Magnum performance in a semi-auto and a popular semi-auto configuration without needing like a long action or anything like that. You can debate whether or not it does that, but what you really can't debate is that it's more powerful than 9mm. We talked about in the rifle episode necking up and necking down, if you don't know what that is. But basically, you take a cartridge meant for a bigger projectile, a bigger bullet, and you neck it down. You shape the neck down to fit a smaller bullet. And that will generally give you bigger powder capacity, shoving a lighter bullet at higher velocities, which at least on paper gives you higher muzzle energy. The 357 SIG kind of quasi did that, necking down a 40 Smith & Wesson to a 9mm bullet. It's called a 357 SIG, which can be confusing. It doesn't actually use a .357 diameter bullet like a 357 Magnum. It uses a 9mm bullet, which in imperial measurement is .355. I guess I didn't think the 355 Magnum sounded as good. But the 357 SIG really does give more power than a 9mm. If you were looking for like a handgun hunting cartridge and you didn't want to step up to the 10mm because you didn't want a larger frame handgun, that really would be an option. Also, if you just want a self-defense cartridge that has a little bit more power than the 9mm and a little bit, in my opinion, better than the 40 Smith & Wesson in a lot of ways. There's a lot of police agencies still clinging to this 40 Smith & Wesson, but there are a few that have now currently and have for years carried the 357 SIG. It has some advantages. Like I said, if you want a handgun that has more power, if you're only going to be able to carry a handgun and you might encounter people carrying a rifle and you might have to engage with them at longer ranges, that's already, lopsided. You don't want to go against a rifle with a pistol. But if you have to, the 357 SIG does give you a flatter trajectory, a little bit more power at range. So that's something to consider, the 357 SIG. It's a cool round. It's maybe a niche round. One of the big advantages that this has going for it is that you can generally take a lot of guns chambered in 40 Smith & Wesson, which a lot of guns are, and a lot of those are hitting the used market for a good price because that cartridge has fallen out of favor for a variety of reasons. But you can just put it, literally, in most guns, just drop a new barrel in it, and you make it a 357 SIG. And you just keep the old barrel around for if you want to keep it around if there's ammo shortages like there are now, and you find 40 Smith & Wesson, you just want to go out and go shoot. That's a good thing to have. So the 357 SIG, and these next two cartridges are going to be like it. The next one you may have never heard of. It's the 9mm Winchester Magnum. Instead of just taking a different cartridge and shoving a smaller bullet in it, this is kind of its own cartridge. Now, it's aptly named, I think, this cartridge, because it is kind of a 9mm Magnum. It's a 9mm. If you were to take it and be able to put it in like a long action, something like a 1911, the 9mm you're all familiar with, very popular, just what most people call the 9mm is a 9x19, but the 9mm Winchester Magnum is the 9x29mm, if that gives you any idea. Wikipedia lists it throwing 115 grain projectile, which is pretty common for a 9mm, at 1450 feet per second. The next one, very similar and I would say more popular, is the 9x23, also developed by Winchester. And this is a cool cartridge, one I have thought about several times owning, because my favorite platform to shoot is the 1911. I don't always shoot in 45. In fact, most of mine are in 9mm or even 22. But if you own a 9mm and like a 9mm, you could easily get a 9mm type platform rechambered in a 1911. Let's say you had it in a 9mm, which are pretty common nowadays. You could get it rechambered to the 9x23. And since the 1911 is already based on that longer cartridge of the 45 ACP, you're really not giving anything up, and you're gaining quite a bit of power. I'm going off of shooting times. It's just what I found when I looked up the cartridge, and it's launching 115 grain projectile at 1517 feet per second is published. That's the published load data. Your load data may vary, but that is much higher, quite a bit of a boost in performance over the 9mm. And I guess we'll throw in another here, talking about, kind of hopped up 9mm. 9mm is all the rage nowadays, and I really like the 9mm cartridge. But it's the 9x25 Dillon. Again, you could take something like you could take a 1911 originally chambered 410mm, which are not fairly common, but they're not hard to find. Or even 40 Smith & Wesson. They did make those for a while when 40 Smith & Wesson was all the rage. Especially a lot of older competition guns, you can find 1911s, even double-stack 1911 patterns, in a 40 Smith & Wesson. And this cartridge is a 9x25 Dillon. A lot of people know about the 10mm, what a powerhouse it is, but picture the 10mm neck down to 9mm. So, like would be like the big brother. This would be like the 357 SIG we talked about, with quite a big boost in performance. The 9x25 Dillon. Some load data for this beast this is just off of Wikipedia. It's throwing a 90 grain bullet at 2100 feet per second. That's not quite, rifle velocity, but it's getting close to like intermediate velocities. 2100 feet per second is pretty high. You're getting up there in velocity for a pistol. It's throwing 115 grain, which is probably the most common load for 9mm. And this is 115 grain Spear Gold Dot at 1800 feet per second. And that's a published load. That's not like loading it up hot. That's a published load, 1800 feet a second. For 800 foot-pounds, 827 foot-pounds, if you want to get specific. And, a common 9mm load is around 400, so you're getting double the foot-pounds. So anyway, all that being said, I guess, just to say that the 9x25 Dillon is a powerhouse. Pretty cool round. The next one we're going to talk about kind of on the, I guess not on the opposite end of the spectrum, but a different philosophy than a 9x25 Dillon. No doubt many of you have heard about the FN57, a very cool round, a very cool dual-purpose pistol and rifle round. Well, the next one we're going to talk about, I guess, could most closely be compared to the 57 FN. And it's going to be the 22 TCM. Now, they did a pretty cool thing here. I don't know if you guys have ever noticed when you've been shooting. If you ever hold like a 45 ACP in your hand and a 308 case in your hand, you'll notice that their diameter, not the bullet diameter, but the case diameter, is kind of very similar. And you may have noticed the same thing with the 9mm and the 223, that, they're very similar in the case diameter, especially at the base. Well, they kind of harnessed this when they went for the 22 TCM, and I don't know exactly who designed it when I say they, but basically what they did was they took the 223 or the 556 case and cut it down to be short, to be basically the same length as, I don't know if it's exactly the same length, but pretty close to the same length as a 9mm or a 45 to fit into common pistols. And because it's a thicker, more robust case meant to be fired in a rifle, they loaded it to higher pressures, I believe. and that lets you launch a bullet pretty fast, especially a small lightweight bullet. So basically, I guess think about it as taking a 5.56, cutting it way down, and then necking it back to 22, and you'd have the 22 TCM. And if I was going to use a super lightweight, I guess not super, but a lightweight, high velocity, high capacity handgun, it would be the FN57. But what the 22 TCM is really cool is that since it's basically based on the 223 or a 9mm case diameter, is that they make conversion kits. So you could get, I saw that they make a 22 TCM conversion for a Glock 17 and a Glock 19. That's pretty cool if you just want something different to mess around with. And also, I believe when it very first came out, it was made for a rifle, but we're talking about pistol cartridges. So this is a dual-purpose rifle pistol cartridge, and it came out years and years ago. I remember a buddy of mine getting the Rock Island Armory 1911 that came in 9mm and 22 TCM. It was like a conversion barrel where you just take one barrel out and put the other one in. I believe that's probably all you had to do. Maybe you had to change out a recoil spring. I don't really remember. You have a 1911, and you could have a 9mm barrel for, you know, your high volume fun practice. And you could have the 22 TCM barrel if you wanted a high velocity round. Now, I looked up the ballistics real quick on Wikipedia, and it was saying it was throwing a 40-grain bullet, I believe, at 1,800 feet per second. And I was like, wow, that's really fast. And then I realized that that was for a rifle. If you guys aren't super familiar with ballistics, the longer barrel you get, almost always, there may be some exception, but the longer the barrel, the more velocity you get. So you're going to get more out of a rifle than you will out of a handgun. Same is true for something like a 22 long rifle or 22 Magnum or even a 9mm if you put it in a rifle, or a 357 Magnum if you put it in a rifle. You're going to get more velocity. So that being said, I looked up some pistol ballistics for the 22 TCM, and what I came up with was a 40-grain projectile at 1,300 feet per second. Why might you want a cartridge like this? Well, maybe just for fun, maybe just for something cool. Maybe you want to challenge yourself with a pistol and see how far you can shoot targets with your semi-automatic, with your 1911 platform. Maybe you want to go hunt small to, I guess what I'll call large small games, something like fox or coyotes or something like that with a pistol. With your semi-auto, maybe you're just a Glock fanboy and you really like the Glock 19, the Glock 17, and not that you can't go out and hunt, small to medium to small game, jackrabbits and rabbits and things like that with a 9mm. I certainly have done that, squirrels and rabbits with a 9mm. But maybe you want the 22 TCM. Be a cool little thing. It's a conversion kit, so you don't have to buy a whole different gun. Like if you want the FN57, you either have to buy in the handgun the actual FN57 handgun, or buy the Ruger 57. But with this, it's a conversion kit, so that's pretty cool. Moving on, the next one we're going to talk about, I think, is a cartridge that never really took off. And this is one of the ones I don't know why it didn't take off, because it's really a sweet spot in ballistics and really a great round. And that's going to be the 41 Magnum. Most of you guys are familiar with the 357 Magnum. It has a great reputation for a good reason. Most of you guys are familiar with the 44 Magnum, the Dirty Harry gun. Growing up, it was the gun that my dad carried and had, was Ruger Red Hawk 44 Magnum, or Ruger Super Red Hawk and 44 Magnum. He hunted with it. It was his defensive gun. 44 Magnum is not a new kid on the block anymore. It's been around a long time. It's got a good reputation. It is good for hunting pretty much anything in North America with a handgun. But the cartridge I'm going to talk about, it's a Magnum revolver cartridge, like the ones mentioned, that lies in the middle. And it's the 41 Magnum. The 41 Magnum, if I get my history correct, and I'm doing this from memory, it was developed at first to be like a police round. They wanted something a little bit more powerful, and you can't really... And the 41 Magnum kind of is that middle ground between the 357 and the 44 Magnum. And there's quite a big gap in between there. And it seems to me like it should be more popular, and I don't know why it's not. I don't know why it's not more popular than like the 500 Smith & Wesson, other than Americans just want the biggest thing they can get. But I would have no problem hunting anything in North America with a revolver and 44 Magnum. I really have no desire to shoot a 500 Smith & Wesson or to own a 500 Smith & Wesson. I maybe even shot one. I've shot a lot of guns, but I have no desire to own a 500 Smith & Wesson or a 460 or anything like that. The 41 Magnum really is a sweet spot. You get to a point where more power is just kind of a waste. If your bullet punches a clean hole through both sides of the living thing you're trying to take out and still has energy, any more energy than that is kind of a waste. You could say the 357 Magnum does that, and I would argue for protection, the 357 Magnum is all that you need. But if you wanted this for hunting or for wilderness defense on something maybe a little bit tougher in hide and thickness and things like that, and you may have to pull double duty as a defensive gun, but that was its secondary role. The 41 Magnum, I would say, would be better than the 44 Magnum if you lived east of the Mississippi. Strike that. Not even the Mississippi, anywhere shy of grizzly bear territory. So the 41 Magnum, really a cool round, kind of in a niche that, like I said, I don't know why it's not more popular other than it came out kind of at the wrong time. It came out to be a police revolver cartridge right about the time police were switching over to semi-autos. So they maybe marketed it wrong. They maybe should have marketed it as the sweet spot revolver hunting cartridge. But it really is that, I think. So the 41 Magnum, really cool round. The next one I'll mention kind of also lies in the middle of these two cartridges, except it does it in a different way, and that's the 357 Maximum. The 357 Maximum, why you might want this over the 41 Magnum is that if you already reload or already set up for a 38 Special 357 Magnum and a revolver, but you want a little bit more, the 357 Maximum really bumps up the power of the 357 Magnum. But you can do it with a lot of the same components. So if you already have the bullets for the 357 Magnum, you already have the same powders for the 357 Magnum, same primers. Really all you need is the longer case, and you can probably get those in cases. They're not the thing you have to get rid of every time you shoot them unless you split a case or something. Then you can use those cases over and over. So the 357 Maximum, and what's cool about that versus like the 41 Magnum, is that you can still shoot 38 Special in it, the regular 357 Magnum. Another cool thing is, if you have a single shot, either rifle or pistol, you can usually get a chamber reamer, a pretty easy gunsmithing project from what I understand. I've never done it. But you can ream it out, a 357 Magnum, and make it a 357 Maximum. Not with a revolver. With a revolver, you need a bigger frame. But since the round is not really coveted, at least not right now. Sometimes things go in cycles and some things are really coveted in the gun community and some things aren't. But since this one's not right now, you may be able to find a used 357 Maximum. I know Dan Wesson made some beautiful ones. And just a really cool thing. So just those numbers are out there. And this is from the Wikipedia page, so take that for what it's worth. I'm not saying this is fact, but it says it'll shoot a 180 grain bullet at 1900 feet per second. From the same source, Wikipedia, like I said, I'm not touting this as fact, and ballistics are not an exact science, but it's the 40 Smith & Wesson, which is a popular cartridge, and it's most popular, I believe, in 180 grain, which is the grain we just loaded for the 357 Maximum. It's launching 180 grain, it says on Wikipedia, same source, 180 grain bullet at 984 feet per second. The 357 Maximum we just read was 1900. 900 and something versus 1900 and something, if that gives you some idea. So if you see a used 357 Maximum, especially if it's a Dan Wesson, because those are fine revolvers, if you see one, don't be shy of getting it, because you can still, go out and shoot it and carry it with 357 Magnums, 38 Specials, and then if you ever want to do some hunting and you want a little bit more range than you would get out of 357 Magnum, or you want to load a heavier bullet at, the same velocity you could load a lighter bullet in 357 Magnum, you can do that. The 357 Maximum, I think, definitely deserves a shout out. And we could go on a long time about a lot of other obsolescent cartridges or passed over cartridges for whatever reason. The gun community is kind of fickle on things that they think are great and things that they think aren't great. And so they may or may not be based in reality. But mostly today, I just wanted to get and hang out with you guys and chat about guns, because, we're gun people. If you're listening to this, you probably are a gun person. You probably like talking about guns and hearing about guns. So hopefully you liked hearing about this. If I didn't mention your favorite obscure cartridge, please go in the comments, like, subscribe, leave a comment. You can even write a review and leave the comment. Great podcast, but I can't believe you forgot the blah, blah, blah cartridge, and then leave it in there. That way other people can see it and say, oh yeah, that's a great cartridge. But hopefully you had fun here today, hanging out in the community, hearing about guns, hearing about ammo, hearing about all kinds of stuff. If you like this podcast, you may also like the Alpha Male podcast. Same host. So if you like this one, you may like that one. If you care about the important stuff, you may like Simple Man Sermons, the preachings of a simple man called by God to share the good news of Jesus Christ. These podcasts are free to listen to, but they are not free to produce, sadly. So if you'd like to support the podcast, I'd encourage you to go to Patreon. I'll put a link in the show notes. All you got to do is click it for, as little as $1 a month, and you can even sign up and then unsubscribe, so you only have to pay $1. But what is that in comparison to a cost of ammo nowadays? So if you thought this show or this episode was worth $1 or a past show was worth $1, I'd really encourage you to go there and help out the community you're now a part of. I said just go in the show notes and click the link. Go to Patreon and type in, Patreon. Good Shepherd Training is the umbrella that hosts all those podcasts. Good Shepherd Training. If you don't remember that, you can just type in Gunfighter Life. Another cool thing about Patreon is you can message me on there. You can ask me about gun stuff on there. And hopefully I'll be able to answer you, whatever the question is about gun stuff. If you care about my opinion on it, you can ask, and I can check it out on Patreon. There's also some insider content on there you can see if you become a patron. If you're a more visual person, you can check out Good Shepherd Training on Instagram or Facebook, and there'll be some pictures and stuff up there. Anyway, with that, guys, thanks for listening to the end. As a thank you, I will give you a tactical tip. That's something I do on some of the episodes at the end, a tactical tip. This one probably should have been on the CQB episode, the Close Quarters Combat episode I did a little while back. But anyway, I thought of it tonight at the gym, so I'm putting it in now. It is a technique that I was taught while contracting. I'm not telling you this is safe to do or that you should do this. I'm telling you this is what I was taught. So if you do this and get hurt, this is your fault, not mine. So there's the disclaimer. But as you may or may not know or be aware of, if you shove the muzzle of a semi-automatic pistol against something, almost always it will go out of battery and the gun will not fire. If you reach your thumb up and shove it hard on the back of the slide, that will let you shove the muzzle hard into your intended target, whatever that may be, and get one good contact shot in without taking the pistol out of battery. So something you should be aware of if that situation ever arises and you need to do it. You can probably look up the technique and see a visual demonstration of it. Be advised that slide is going to want to come back, so your thumb has to be stronger than that slide for this technique to work. And I'm not saying that this is safe to do, but I'm saying in that I have practiced it. I never got injured. I'm not telling you that you won't get injured. You do this at your own risk. But if you ever find yourself in that situation, it's probably better than the alternative. And even more important, I'll close with a verse. And it'll be from Exodus 15, and that is, "The Lord is a man of war." Thanks, guys, and have a blessed day.